the spark that ignited the battle. It all began on a seemingly ordinary morning, but little did I know, that day would mark the start of a war. A war not fought with guns or swords, but with legal papers, a battle of wills, and the audacity to stand up to power. I had just wrapped up another grueling shift at the hospital, my muscles aching, my eyes heavy with exhaustion. All I wanted was a few precious hours of sleep, a break from the intensity of my job as a nurse. It had been a long, brutal 12-hour overnight shift, and the quiet of my suburban neighborhood was exactly what I needed to restore my sanity. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A silver SUV City. First, I tried to brush it off. Perhaps it was a simple mistake. Maybe someone in the neighborhood had car trouble or was just briefly parking there. I figured it would be resolved by the time I returned from my appointment. So, I parked on the street, and with a deep sigh, I left a polite note on the windshield, hoping it would be enough to solve the problem. I didn't know then, but that silver SUV wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of something bigger, something deeply unjust that was unfolding in my quiet, suburban neighborhood. The situation was about to spiral out of control, leading me down a path I never anticipated. When I returned, the situation had escalated. Not only had the SUV remained in my driveway, but my polite note had been ignored, tossed carelessly into the bushes like a piece of trash. My frustration turned into anger. This wasn't just about a car parked in my driveway anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and my right to feel safe and secure in my own home. I needed my driveway clear for my elderly father, who struggled with mobility, to easily access his walker and get in and out of the house. But the SUV wasn't moving, and that's when I knew something wasn't right. The next day, I saw the woman responsible for this intrusion, and everything changed. There, across the street, stood Diane Wilcox, the newly elected president of our Homeowners Association, HOA. She was standing there with a smug look on her face, taking photos of my yard. She didn't even try to hide it. She was inspecting my property as if she had some sort of divine right to control it. And when she saw me watching her from the window, she just waved, as if to say, "I own this place now." At that moment, I felt the anger in me rise to a new level. Diane wasn't just the HOA president. She was a power-hungry tyrant, abusing her position to push people around and make their lives miserable. What had started as a simple violation notice for a parking issue had quickly escalated into a much more serious problem. I had become a target. I soon discovered I was not alone in my frustration. My neighbors, too, had been subjected to unreasonable fines and inspections. It was as if Diane and the HOA board had declared war on the entire community, making up rules that no one could follow and fining residents for the most trivial infractions. No one was safe, whether it was a neighbor's flower pots, an unapproved lawn ornament, or, as I would later find out, something far more sinister. Diane was on a power trip, and the entire neighborhood was her playground. As the fines mounted and the harassment escalated, I realized something had to be done. This wasn't just about a parking spot or a few irritating fines. It was about standing up to the abuse of power, about defending my right to live peacefully in my own home. And as I soon learned, it wasn't just about me. The entire community was being targeted by Diane's corrupt HOA, and it was time to fight back. But what I didn't know at the time was that my sister Amelia, who had recently moved in with me while her house was being renovated, wasn't just a regular guest. Amelia had always been calm under pressure, but beneath that composed exterior, she was harboring a secret that would change everything. You see, Amelia wasn't just a regular lawyer. She was a senior partner at one of the most feared law firms in the city, Lockhart and Montgomery. She specialized in property law and had built a reputation for taking down corrupt developers and unscrupulous business owners. When she found out what was going on, she didn't hesitate for a moment. What had started as a petty HOA dispute would soon turn into a legal battle that would take down Diane, the entire HOA board, and the corrupt development company they were working for. And that's where the real story begins. What started with a simple violation notice would soon uncover a massive conspiracy. Diane and the HOA board weren't just harassing the residents. They were part of a much larger scheme involving shady developers buying up properties in the neighborhood, using the HOA to push out homeowners and drive down property values. The battle was on, and the game was about to change. Amelia wasn't just my sister. She was about to become the hero this community needed. The confrontation and the unveiling of corruption. As the days passed, the tension in our neighborhood grew. The HOA's oppressive rules and petty fines were now a daily fixture, and it wasn't just me. Everyone in Pinecrest Gardens was affected. The air was thick with frustration, and I could see it in my neighbors' faces as they quietly exchanged stories of unfair treatment. Ellen had been fined for something as trivial as the color of her flower pots. Mr. Jacobson, the elderly man down the street, had received a hefty fine for leaving his grandson's tricycle in the front yard, something he had been doing for years without issue. It was clear this wasn't about maintaining property standards. This was about control. I kept thinking back to Diane, the HOA president, as I watched her power trip play out. She seemed to relish the authority she had over everyone in the neighborhood, like a tyrant in a kingdom that only existed in her mind. But what struck me the most was how unbothered she was by the constant barrage of fines she issued. She didn't see the pain she was causing. She only saw her own self-made empire crumbling as others started to resist. But it wasn't until one fateful day that everything changed. Amelia, ever the composed professional, was the one who took the lead. It wasn't just about the fines anymore. This was about exposing the corruption that was deeply embedded in the very foundation of Pinecrest Gardens. Amelia wasn't just some lawyer from a small firm. She was a senior partner at Lockhart and Montgomery, one of the city's most powerful law firms. She had a reputation for taking down the most powerful people in the business world, and now she was going to use that power to take down Diane and her corrupt HOA board. Amelia's first step was to document everything. We were no longer going to be victims of petty harassment. We would fight back, and we would do it strategically. She set up a system to track every violation notice, every fine, every confrontation. And we were meticulous. Amelia knew that the key to winning this battle would be in the details. Evidence, facts, and a deep understanding of property law. But Diane wasn't backing down either. She had her own tricks up her sleeve, and she wasn't going to let go of her power so easily. When Amelia and I thought we had a brief moment of peace, we discovered just how far Diane was willing to go to maintain control over the neighborhood. One morning, I noticed Diane standing at my mailbox with a smug smile plastered on her face. My blood ran cold when I saw the bright pink notice she had taped to the post. Another violation, this time for an unapproved exterior light. Couldn't believe it. The light had been there since I moved in. It was a simple porch light, nothing extravagant, nothing that would warrant a violation. But according to Diane, this was just another way to make life miserable for anyone who dared to challenge her authority. Amelia's response was swift. She instructed me to take photos, keep records, and, most importantly, not to back down. And that's exactly what we did. But Diane wasn't finished yet. Later that day, I found myself in a confrontation I never expected. Diane and Thomas, the HOA treasurer, had sent a tow truck to remove Amelia's car from the street. The audacity of it all was staggering. Amelia's car was parked legally on a public street, but Diane had manipulated the HOA's rules to claim the space as part of her domain. They had no legal right to remove her vehicle, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. But when I confronted the tow truck driver, I learned something that made my stomach churn. Diane had somehow convinced him that they had authority to tow my sister's car. The HOA had no such power over public streets. But that didn't stop Diane from trying to push her weight around. This was the turning point. I called the police, but they were just as baffled as I was. Diane's power had been built on intimidation and manipulation, but now that power was starting to crumble. As the tow truck left with Amelia's car, I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. This wasn't just about parking fines anymore. This was about a corrupt system that was slowly suffocating the life out of our community. But I wasn't going to stand by and watch it happen. Amelia's legal mind had been working overtime, and now we had a strategy. We started digging into the HOA's records. What we uncovered was more than just a series of baseless fines. Diane and her board members were deeply entangled with a development company, Valley Development Group, that was secretly buying up properties in our neighborhood. The entire system had been rigged to drive homeowners out of their homes so that the company could swoop in and buy the properties at a fraction of their worth. As Amelia uncovered more and more about Valley Development's involvement, we realized that this wasn't just about property violations. It was about a real estate conspiracy that had been going on for months. Diane and her cronies were deliberately creating violations to force people to sell their homes at a loss. And this wasn't just a few isolated incidents. It was a pattern, a well-planned scheme to profit off the backs of hard-working homeowners. That's when Amelia made a critical decision. We weren't just going to document the violations. We were going to expose the entire operation. Armed with evidence, photos, and legal knowledge, we began to lay the groundwork for a lawsuit that would take down Diane, the HOA, and Valley Development. But Amelia knew that we had to be careful. This wasn't going to be a simple legal battle. It was a fight against powerful people who had been getting away with corruption for far too long. The stakes were high, but Amelia wasn't afraid. She had taken down corrupt corporations before, and now she was going to take down the corrupt HOA and its shady associates. In the meantime, things were escalating. Diane wasn't backing down either. She started using intimidation tactics, sending security guards to our homes, and even resorting to more drastic measures to get us to comply with her demands. But Amelia was unshaken. She knew that the law was on our side, and now she had the resources and support she needed to make sure we didn't lose this fight. And then one night it all came to a head. Diane and her security team barged into my home, demanding to speak with Amelia. What followed was nothing short of shocking. A confrontation that escalated into physical violence, leaving Amelia tasered and fighting for her life. Diane had gone too far. The legal war and the shattering of a corrupt empire. After Amelia was tasered in front of my house, everything changed. It was no longer just about petty HOA violations or nuisances. It was no longer just about a personal vendetta from Diane. Now it was about justice, and the stakes had skyrocketed. What Diane and her allies didn't realize, however, was that they had awakened something far more powerful than they could ever imagine. A senior partner at a top law firm who wasn't about to let them get away with it. Amelia had been knocked down, but she wasn't out. In fact, the attack had only fueled her resolve to bring Diane and the entire corrupt HOA down. The police arrived quickly, as expected, but what they didn't know was that the real story was about to unfold before their eyes. As the officers took statements from us, it became clear that this wasn't just a case of excessive force. It was an attack on the rule of law. Diane's smug confidence had shattered the moment Amelia revealed her true identity. She wasn't just some helpless victim. She was a feared lawyer, a partner at a firm that had taken down powerful entities before. Now, Diane was in the crosshairs of a legal powerhouse, and her little empire was starting to crumble. As Amelia recovered from the shock of the taser attack, we immediately set our sights on taking legal action. We weren't going to let Diane and her thugs intimidate us anymore. Amelia had already started gathering evidence before the attack, meticulously documenting every violation, every instance of harassment, and every bit of proof that pointed to the involvement of Valley Development Group. She wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. The fight was just beginning, and we had an entire neighborhood behind us. Our first step was to gather all of the information we had accumulated so far. From there, we worked on building a case that would expose the entire conspiracy. Amelia's firm jumped into action, assembling a team of attorneys who specialized in property rights and HOA abuses. We knew that the road ahead was going to be long and hard, but we were determined to see it through. And soon enough, our efforts began to pay off. In the days that followed, the local news picked up the story. The video of Amelia being tasered had gone viral, and the public outcry was deafening. Neighbors, people from surrounding areas, and even strangers from other parts of the city rallied behind us. The community's collective fury was palpable, and it was clear that Diane and her cronies had underestimated how far we were willing to go. What started as a small issue in one neighborhood had now turned into a full-blown scandal. As the investigation into Diane and Valley Development began, we started to see cracks appear in their carefully built empire. The more we dug, the more we uncovered. Diane's real estate dealings were more extensive than we had imagined. She had orchestrated an entire scheme to push homeowners out of their properties by creating violations, levying exorbitant fines, and using her position as HOA president to manipulate the system. The goal was simple: buy up properties at a fraction of their market value and redevelop the area into a luxury condominium complex. This wasn't just a case of petty overreach. It was a coordinated effort to exploit vulnerable people and manipulate the housing market for profit. Amelia and our team of lawyers were relentless. They filed motions, subpoenaed records, and demanded answers from Valley Development. We were able to expose the financial links between Diane, Thomas, and the development company. The connections were undeniable. They had been working together to artificially inflate fines, create violations, and push people out, all while lining their pockets with the proceeds from cheap property acquisitions. It was a textbook case of real estate corruption, and we had the proof to back it up. But just as things were starting to unravel for Diane, she made one final, desperate move. On the night before our class action lawsuit was set to be filed, we saw Diane's car speeding away from her house. When we looked outside, we saw smoke rising from her backyard. She was burning documents, crucial evidence that could tie her to the entire scheme. Couldn't believe it. Diane wasn't just trying to cover up her actions. She was trying to destroy the truth. But we weren't about to let that happen. Amelia, ever the professional, wasted no time. She snapped photos of the burning documents and immediately called the police. The evidence was irrefutable. Diane had crossed a line, and now we had the smoking gun that could bring her down for good. Firefighters arrived at the scene and secured the area as a crime scene. Diane's actions were now officially part of the ongoing investigation. As the weeks passed, the tide turned in our favor. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out against Diane started coming forward with their own stories. We compiled everything into a comprehensive case, and soon enough the district attorney's office was involved. Diane was arrested, along with several members of the HOA board. Thomas, the HOA treasurer, turned on Diane, agreeing to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. The news cameras captured everything as the corrupt HOA officials were escorted out in handcuffs. The community had won. But the battle didn't stop there. The legal war had only just begun. As the investigation into Valley Development and the HOA continued, we discovered that the corruption ran deeper than we had ever imagined. Diane had used her position to exploit residents, manipulate the housing market, and enrich herself and her associates at the expense of the community. We were able to secure a settlement that compensated homeowners for the fines, harassment, and emotional distress they had endured. The settlement was a staggering $4.8 million, a victory that sent shockwaves through the city. The real victory, however, came when the new HOA board was elected. Amelia's work had helped rewrite the rules, ensuring that future boards would operate transparently and fairly. No more secret meetings, no more underhanded tactics. The community had taken back control of its future, and Diane's reign of terror was over. As for me, I couldn't have been prouder of my sister. What began as an attack on our family had turned into a victory for the entire neighborhood. Amelia had brought down a corrupt empire, and in doing so, she had proven that one person, one family, could make a difference. In the end, our quiet neighborhood became a beacon of hope for others who had suffered at the hands of corrupt HOA boards and greedy developers. We had fought back and we had won. And as for Diane, well, she learned the hard way that you can only push people so far before they push back. The power of standing up against injustice. What we learned from this experience is powerful. Sometimes, standing up against injustice requires more than just courage. It takes persistence, unity, and a commitment to fighting for what's right, no matter how intimidating the forces against you may seem. The story of Diane, the HOA president, is a reminder that power can easily be abused by those in positions of authority. But it's also a reminder that even the most oppressive systems can be torn down when people come together, hold their ground, and demand accountability. In this case, it wasn't just about fighting for our rights. It was about defending our community, our neighbors, and the values we all hold dear. Amelia's expertise and relentless pursuit of justice were pivotal in exposing the systemic corruption that was happening right under our noses. Together, we all took action, from documenting violations to standing up to the local authorities, and eventually we brought the whole corrupt operation down. This victory wasn't just ours. It was a win for everyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of bureaucracy, corruption, or exploitation. It proves that when the community unites, when people decide to stop tolerating abuse, and when we use the systems in place to our advantage, there's no obstacle too great to overcome. So what's the takeaway here? If you find yourself facing an unjust system or a bully in your neighborhood, whether it's an HOA, a company, or any other entity, don't back down. Document everything, know your rights, and most importantly, never be afraid to stand up for yourself and those around you. Justice may take time, but in the end, it always prevails. If you found this story inspiring and believe in the power of standing up against injustice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real stories of resilience and triumph. Let's keep this conversation going. Drop a comment below and tell us how you've stood up against the odds in your life or community. Together, we can make a difference. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.